Welcome to another episode of Automotive Insiders. I'm your host, Jason Stein. Great to have you back listening again with us. For much of the past 5 years, the automotive industry has been defined by disruption and uncertainty. A global pandemic, semiconductor shortages, the industry's transition towards electrification, software-defined vehicles, and autonomy. New tariffs and geopolitical realignment have also taken shape, and now there's artificial intelligence and new manufacturing paradigms. Against that backdrop, mergers and acquisitions have slowed considerably. But is it about to change? On today's episode, we're joined by Greg Urban, Managing Director at Greenwich Capital Group, one of the leading investment banking firms advising companies across the automotive ecosystem. Greg has spent years helping suppliers navigate transformational transactions, and he believes the industry may be approaching another important inflection point. So today, we discuss why M&A has historically been one of the most powerful tools for suppliers to reposition themselves around higher value activities. We'll also explore why deal activity has been muted in recent years and the forces that could ignite a new wave of consolidation across the supply chain. And we'll talk about what it really takes to prepare for a transaction. Whether you're considering a family-owned business sale, evaluating a corporate carve-out, or pursuing an acquisition strategy of your own, preparation, diligence, and long-term planning have never been more important. This is all a preview to the upcoming MEMA, Deloitte, and Greenwich Capital Group event on July 22nd in Detroit. That'll bring together industry leaders to discuss these important themes in greater detail. A timely conversation on capital, strategy, and the next chapter of transformation in the automotive industry. It's Automotive Insiders, just ahead. Well, welcome into the program, Greg. It's a pleasure to have you on Automotive Insiders. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here.
Let's begin just generally with automotive M&A trends and maybe some recent history where we are in the cycle. Give us your overview of M&A generally, and then maybe just the factors that are at play here as one considers where the industry is.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to talk about where we are today in the M&A cycle and what we're seeing. Frankly, activity has been muted. But to understand where we are and where we're going, I think you're right. Some historical context is helpful in understanding where this is going. So the last really healthy M&A cycle we had was sort of 2010 to 2015. And when I say healthy, I mean deals of all sizes, deals of all different subsystems within the car, a wide variety of buyers, including corporates and private equity, valuations that made sense to both the buyers and the sellers, and a supportive capital markets. And really, the most important thing was that there was a mission to accomplish, right? So for decades prior to the financial crisis, most suppliers pursued a model of scale. The automotive industry is a big capital game, and scale makes sense. But what you had a number of large suppliers that did 5 or 6 different things for very few OEMs. And that really didn't work for the OEMs because they weren't getting the quality, the innovation, the cost that they wanted across the vehicle. And it didn't work for the suppliers either because basically the OEMs were pricing them to their most commodity-like product. So what became in vogue around the financial crisis was, let's focus on doing 1 or 2 things, do them extraordinarily well, deliver innovation to our OEM clients, and be world class in that category, and do it for everybody globally. And so there was a lot of pent up demand for M&A, but really the catalyst for M&A activity was the financial crisis. Suppliers knew that this work needed to be done. Private equity saw them in. So post the financial crisis, you had the drop in volumes, and then you had the recovery. So that growth was something that private equity could latch onto, and they saw a need for their deal activity and deal expertise to help move assets around until we got to that ultimate place where suppliers really were doing 1 or 2 things best in the world. And then there was a pause. Once that work was done, 2015 on, auto supplier margins were at all-time highs, and they were enjoying that. After doing a lot of M&A, there was a lot of digesting and rethinking corporate strategies and just finding new ways to serve OEMs, but M&A wasn't a priority. And growth had moderated, and so private equity took a back seat. But then, listening to your podcast, often called the series of black swans events happened, right? So supply chain disruption, COVID, tariffs, and on and on and on. And from that point, sort of the last 5 years in M&A, I would say operators had better things to do than to think about M&A to keep their businesses afloat. So really, it's been 10 years of a pause. But what's also happened in that 10 years in the vehicle is truly remarkable. The boom and bust of the EV hype cycle and moderated growth going forward. The emergence of the software-defined vehicle, ADAS, and the global decoupling from Asia, driven by supply chain fragility, the emergence of Eastern OEMs, and other factors have really led to a situation where the supply base that we built just 10 or 15 years ago really isn't set up for where the industry is going. And so I think that there's a lot of pent-up demand for M&A going forward.
Yeah, you've kind of characterized it as a new round of reorientation that's going to be needed, right? Can you describe that for me?
Yeah. So you have suppliers. Really, what's caused a lot of pause on M&A has just been uncertainty. Where is the industry going? And again, that's the EV boom and bust and other factors. But I think now that there's more pragmatism around what we're going to do with electric vehicles, and frankly, the Chinese OEMs, if you look at the teardown of those vehicles, you see a new blueprint for what the future car will look like. I think suppliers today have a better sense for what they need to become over the next few years. Now, I did say M&A is paused. It's not that scenario that I described at the onset of the podcast, but we have seen some big deals, big spinoffs. Doubling down on the types of capabilities that suppliers are good at, doubling down on technology. And why those deals have been done is because players know they need to make this transformation, and they have the balance sheets to do it. I think that'll trickle down to smaller deals and to all aspects of the supply chain once the capital markets are supportive. But right now, it's a lot of strategy and a lot of planning to get to that place where we're going to help suppliers reorient their portfolios to supply that future car.
So before we get to preparing for a transaction, I want to focus on a couple of aspects here and the reasons why M&A may increase in the near term. And it's kind of threefold, right? You have family-owned businesses that are aging out. You have distress. And then you have portfolio rationalization, even around technology. Maybe explain that for us and why you think the trend may have a bit of a different velocity to it.
Yeah. So what's really caused a pause in M&A activity is the uncertainty that I described, but also the uncertainty just in the broader global market, uncertainty with the consumer, uncertainty of all kinds. It's really difficult to invest without having certainty on what you're going to get from your investment. There's been a valuation gap which is closing, and PE has been on the sidelines. So they're seeing this new opportunity arising, and they're seeing a rise in companies that need exits at sort of any cost. The automotive industry is a very unique industry for a multitude of reasons, but it is an industrial sector, right? And so it's been a really challenging environment, as we all know, and that has led to distress. What's interesting is, so with distressed deals, it's less and less up to the owner whether they want to sell the business or not. If they're breaking their covenants on their debt, sometimes they're forced to sell. We're seeing a trend of private credit, the companies that have been funding these companies, where 5 years ago in COVID, they would say, I don't want to take the keys to this company. I don't want to operate it. I don't know how to operate it. I'm forced to give concessions alongside the OEMs to keep these businesses going until they can work their way out of these challenges. Over the last 5 years, we've seen private credit say, I don't want to do that again. They've been investing in operational capabilities themselves, and they increasingly are willing to take the keys to maximize their recovery. It's probably a trend that the suppliers that are listening to us today don't want to hear, but it's true and it's coming, and suppliers should prepare for that. And then across the industrial sector in the US, there is a glut of family owned businesses without succession plans. Over 65% of companies with senior operators don't have a clear, well defined succession plans. There are fantastic businesses in the automotive industry that are on generation 2, generation 3, but the current children of these owner operators, they saw how challenging the industry was. They don't want to do this, and they've went to school to become anything other than an automotive supplier. So those companies, they have great customers, great positions, they have contracts that need to be fulfilled. And so, a sale of those businesses is ultimately the right answer for a lot of them.
So if we're going that route, if a supplier is preparing for a transaction, I know you have two different aspects to this. One is preparation being essential, and the other is considerations by deal type. Can you explain those two?
Yeah, so a typical M&A process takes 6 to 9 months. That's a company that's packaged and ready to sell from all aspects of the business, right? There's 3 phases. There's the preparation, diligence, making of the marketing materials, refining the financial model. We need to know everything about the businesses so there's no surprises later. The second phase is marketing. We reach out to a bunch of buyers, and we whittle that down to the best buyer with the best package for the seller. Then you sign an LOI. Then it flips to negotiation and final diligence. In that final phase, the power shifts because there's not multiple bidders trying to get your attention. There's one that you're negotiating with. That's why there can be no surprises except positive ones. And preparation is absolutely essential. So, I said the typical process is 6 to 9 months. Where it typically can get longer is in that preparation phase. And there's 3 types of transactions that we are really focusing on that are very relevant to the automotive space. Corporate carve-outs, you have to do a lot of work to define what you're selling, what is the management team, what is the value proposition for that business, whether you've been investing into it or not, what deal structures are acceptable, who is the team to help carve it out on the other side. In a distress sale, the more time that you give yourself ahead of feeling that pressure, the more options you have. You don't want to be in a position where they're making the decision for you. So engage help as soon as possible to understand your options before those options go away from you. And then family-owned businesses, many of these businesses, they have good financial controls for what they do, for making decisions, paying their taxes, et cetera, but they're not ready to communicate with these sellers who have extreme resolution in their financial models and speak the Wall Street's language, right? Large corporate companies really need to know a lot about the financial status of the company. Private equity digs in deeply as well. And so it takes extra preparation, whether that's operational issues to be solved ahead of a launch or just doing that extra work on the financials before launching a process is critical, as well as understanding family dynamics and structuring things from a tax and personal wealth perspective so that you get the outcome that you want on the other side. As well as it's not just about valuation with family-owned businesses, and so understanding how important is maintaining the legacy, the existing employees of the company, and other factors. And so it's a complicated process. It's simple to explain, but it's a very complicated process to dig in and get all of this stuff just right. And again, it's all about preparation.
Lots to consider in a rapidly changing market with a convoluted set of steps. But Greg, thank you for explaining all of that to us. And I know that we'll hear more on July 22nd. Do you want to talk about the event?
Yes, MEMA is hosting an M&A event on July 22nd in their headquarters in Southfield, Michigan. We are co-hosting the event alongside Deloitte. We'll talk through how to prepare to launch a sell-side process, what the sell-side process looks like, what you do after the fact to make sure that your M&A deal is a success. We'll have some great panels. We'll talk about the legal, financing, and regulatory framework, and then we'll have some great business operators who have done some M&A recently to talk about their experiences. Sign up, and we look forward to seeing you there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Greg.
Thank you.
Great.
It was great to be here.
Thank you. Thanks again to my guest, Greg Urban, Managing Director at Greenwich Capital Group. And thank you for listening. Don't forget about MEMA, Deloitte, and Greenwich Capital Group's event on July 22nd in Detroit. Thank you for listening to this episode of Automotive Insiders. Come back to us again for more programs on this podcast platform. I'm your host, Jason Stein. We'll see you again next time.